tēnā tātou, ka mihi atu ki oku whanauka, te hau kaingo o tēnei whenua. Ka mihi atu ki a koutou hoki, te tangata tiaki o te taiao. So Lakes 380, searching for answers in the mud, unearthing the history of lakes in Aotearoa. I grew up, so I'm from Ōtākā and Puketeraki and Ngāti Toa and Te Aotearoa. But I grew up on the coast, didn't pay too much attention to lakes, to be honest. Did spend a lot of time in central Otago, but it was always the surface of the lakes, right? You think about lakes, I never thought about what was below them. There's not much food down there, and you've got the coast that's got paua that are legal sideways. You don't really need to worry about what's in the lake. Paua and koda and other stuff, so never really thought about what was under the lakes. Turns out there's a whole different world down there. Will this work? No, maybe. Oh, there we go. Oops. Too far. Amateur. Turn that off. There we go. So it turns out Lakes 380, as Pahia said, it's not about the degrees. It's about the number of lakes we've got in this country. 3,820 lakes, bigger than 1 hectare across Aotearoa. That number in itself was a bit of an eye-opener to me. And they are very diverse, from sort of these high alpine lakes to lowland lakes, and the quality varies significantly across those. That's one of the lakes up, or two wharikai, I think, Ashburton Lakes, at the back of Canterbury. And that's some of the team out collecting samples for this project. That's the 3,820 lakes across Aotearoa. Clearly there's a fairly big, fairly high number down in Fiordland, and that actually skews some of the numbers I'll talk about later on, but that number down in Fiordland is middle of a national park, so they're reasonably pristine. But yeah, as you can see, a lot more lakes than I thought we had in this country. I didn't really think about it too much, but 3,820, a lot of lakes, right? And they vary, as I said, so Lake Mock, Horseshoes on the edge of Hamilton, Whangapeas in Hamilton, Duncan Stream's up in the Southern Alps somewhere. I think that's in Te Wharikai as well. But they vary greatly. That's out on the Chatham Islands, actually. And totally different. Some of them are sandies. Those are peat lakes out on the Chatham Islands. Waikato's got a lot of peat lakes. And the structure of those lakes and what's actually down there, completely different across the country. We only monitor about 140 of those lakes on a permanent basis. There's monitoring 140 of those things, looking at water quality. That's those orange yellow dots on there. So we don't really know that much about them, to be fair. We know that they're, and most of those are probably near productive sort of areas, that we monitor the lakes in productive areas that have got permanent sort of monitoring equipment in them, mostly by regional councils. There's a few science people out there doing stuff. Disclaimer, I'm not a scientist. I'm a lawyer by trade, but have worked in sort of environmental management stuff for the last 30 years with Ngāi Tahu and iwi from around the Motu. So, bit of lakes porn, just some pictures of lakes because they're pretty. Well, I think they're pretty. Those groups down the bottom are the people, part of the team we've been working with in Lakes 380. It's a fairly big rōpū, multidisciplinary, from scientists, biologists, all sorts of people that are much clever than me. This is collecting some of the lake samples. So it's called a ponar, that thing. It's basically a steel box you drop on the bottom and it collects a grab of sediment off the bottom. It's surface sediment, so you can look at that thing there as a 2-metre plastic tube, which you basically hammer into the bottom of the lake and pull it up, and it's full of sediment, which is a vertical take of the sediment. Clearly occupational safety and health is high on our agenda. That's Dr. Chris Moy from Canterbury. He's a Canadian. There's a few of those around, so we thought we'd chuck him on the edge of the boat. But for me, it's been a real privilege. Like I said, I'm a lawyer. How the hell I ended up working on Lakes 380 and paddling around boats is a little bit beyond me. The rumour was they needed some muscle, so we actually got in Reece Martin, not me. This other big Māori fella, he carried the stuff around and we sort of tagged along and did some of the physical work. I'm not the one in the lab doing anything. My waka stopped when the stuff gets back to the shore, and we put it into pass it on to the lab and they'll do the clever work. My role's been more the physical stuff and hauling ropes and pulling stuff out of the lake. So Māori Purepa, the idea of ripples, that photo on the left there, you don't see that when you're on the boat. You don't see those concentric things coming out. It's kind of cool to see it in that context, and then the theme of this hui, that you drop that pebble and then it does spread out. I think that's a useful metaphor for this, both for this mahi and for what we're talking about today. That the idea of those ripples moving outwards from the centre, and yeah, it's because when you're on the boat, all you can see is what you're doing right in front of you. Right, you're hammering this. It's about a 20 kg steel weight, and you stand there with a rope pulling it up and down to hammer this thing into the bottom of the lake. Sometimes you get 2 metres, sometimes you get about 30 centimetres, and you hit something hard and you can't get any further. And it varies. Like Tarawera, we're about 90 metres deep, I think. Pulling 30 kgs up from 90 metres 4 times just takes a bit of effort, but the stratification in those cores from Tarawera is amazing. You can see the tephra when Tarawera blew. There's this massive layer of ash, and it's very obvious in the sediment. There's a few pictures of cores later on. You can see the change from. So what we're trying to do is capture 1,000 years in time, right? If that 2 metre core will take you back 1,000 years in time. So pre-human occupation of Aotearoa. There's a clear definition of when Māori were here and we started burning stuff. There's a layer of charcoal and bracken coming into the environment. And then after that, it sort of gets darker and more crappy when the Pākehās arrived and started putting fertiliser and cows and sheep and stuff on. But I'll get to that too. But it's not just about the lab work. It's not just about the biophysical science stuff. We've tried really hard to engage with people, communities, tangata whenua. As part of this project, with Hami there being interviewed down beside Wairarapa Moana, and to bring that flavour of stuff into the project as well has been really critical. It's not just about how much nitrogen is there, what plants were there, that sort of stuff. It's about those human stories that connect us to those places as well. And there's heaps of stuff, products, lakesreality.com, lakestoriesnz.org, so all the results are all on there. There's videos. Tumai and Pauletta here somewhere. We did some cool stuff down in Otago, Waihora ki Taiari with them. Made some documentaries and things around our Ngaitahu stories around those places and the experiences we've had with those lakes. And most of the lakes, there's a breakdown of, you can see a little bit in some of those, I don't have to turn this light on, but those graphs, how things have changed in those periods. That light green one at the bottom is pre-human, the middle one is the Māori settlement, and the top one is when the Pākehās arrived. And you can see the change in the graphs. They go very steep after we started doing more intensive use around of our whenua. So estimating lake water quality. Turns out you can collect this mud off the bottom of a lake and figure out whether it's good, healthy, bad or otherwise, and you can measure that across time. So as I said, we've only got 140 odd lakes being monitored. Lakes 380 was based on 380 of those 3,820 lakes taking samples from 380 of those lakes, so 10%. And utilising both those sediment, those surface grabs we're taking with that pona, and looking at the bacteria in there saying, what's the quality of this lake now? And then extrapolating that out across the country, you end up with a map that looks like that. So 45% of lakes in the country are poor or worse condition, which is a little bit depressing. It's even worse when you think about the North Island and you take out Fiordland, because it's in the middle of a national park. Most of those lakes are in a pretty good condition. It's pretty bad up north. So those are the rough stats, and it's obviously we didn't measure every single lake, so there's some estimation across those groups there, but it is pretty bad, right? So, East Coast, Tairāwhiti, Mātua Maui, more than 90% of lakes are in poor or worse condition. Almost the entire North Island is worse than 70%. Taranaki's in a bad way. It's that West Coast where it tends to rain a little bit, and Fiordland that sort of saved those numbers at a national level, but at a regional level, there's some pretty alarming sort of figures, I think, in that stuff. Those lakes in Hawke's Bay, 1 in 10 of their lakes is okay. the other 9 are bad. And those are pictures of those pictures on the right there are actual lakes in Hawke's Bay and what they look like, what the water quality looks like. Massive amount of algae. A lot of it's toxic. I think that's one of the Kawika lakes up in the top left, which are pretty hard to get to. Not many people, I suspect, get in there. Some of these lakes we had to carry boats on our shoulders for about 100 metres to get to the actual edge of the lake, but sort of puts people off going there, I guess. But yeah, massive amounts of algae and algal blooms in some of these places, which is a little bit scary. Horizons Manawatu region, 87% of lakes are poor or worse condition. Not a good place to, not great. And 70 of those lakes fail the bottom line in the National Policy Statement on Freshwater Management. So we've got a lot of work to do. I'm not trying to be doom and gloom. I just think it's helpful to see some of the reality of some of the stuff. We know it's bad, right? We know our water quality is being challenged. This to me is a wake-up call to do something about it. It's not to say, oh, too hard, walk away, because we can't walk away. I remember when Foreshore and Seabed happened, I was going to Wakaamo with Judge Joe Williams that morning, and I was lamenting the fact that Michael Cullen come out and said, oh, screw them, we'll just legislate it out. They might have won in the court, but we're Parliament, we'll just legislate it out. He said, don't worry, bro, 100 years the Pākehās will be gone, we'll just take it back then. And I think for me, I've got to remind myself of this now sometimes, right? Shit is bad, but it'll probably keep getting bad for a little while, but we can't just stop. We've got to do something, and because we're here forever. We don't have a choice of going somewhere else. We've got nowhere else to go, so we've got to fix it. So as bad as they are, we've got to do something about it. And I think that to me has been a wake-up call. In terms of the 1,000 years that we can use those sediment cores, 2 metres of mud, you can break it down. We cut them in half, and the scientists study them, and they can pick up pollen from 1,000 years ago. So we can tell you what plants were growing around the edge of that lake 1,000 years ago. So that's what it looks like pre-1300 AD. Pre-human, most of the country was forest, podocarps and big tall trees. Tangana whenua arrived, we started out burning a bit of stuff down to make some places to live, I suspect. Fact, there's carbon in those things that is a clear line of saying there was a fire started here, and we think that was probably when Māori arrived. We started burning a little bit of stuff. Kei te pā, we didn't burn the whole country down. Pākehās did that. They turned up, keep cutting stuff down, set fire to it, built cities. Those fish, trout, perch, tench, rudd, and we know when they introduced, because Fish and Game are really good at keeping records of stuff, so they can almost tell you the day they released that stuff into our environment and where they released it. We've got that data. Then we brought cows and sheep out. So these graphs, these are some of the things we mean. The chlorophyll A slime, basically greasy green stuff in the lakes. That along the bottom is a core. So if you turn that vertical, that's what a 2 metre core taking out of the bottom of the lake would look like, laid down. On the right-hand end, there's is the bottom of the core. So that's the older stuff. On the left-hand side is left-hand side is the oldest. Right-hand side is the newer stuff. And you can see the change in colour through there as the sediment changes. And that red line is where stuff started to go bad. So that's when we thought it might have been trout. That's when trout was introduced. That wasn't the reason. Rudd, tench and perch introduced around then. It wasn't actually cows and sheep, and the original cows and sheep. It was dairy and phosphorus fertiliser that started that change in chlorophyll A, so the slime and algae and the thing, and then nitrogen fertiliser, which changed that steep curve up the top. So we know that now. We can do something about it. It gives us information's power, right? Knowing that stuff allows us to do something about it. And it's going to be hard because, when I grew up, the entire Canterbury Plains was arable farming. It was oats and wheat and everything else. Now it's all cows. And a lot of that places we lived are like that. Just some more lakes, pretty lakes. But again, the difference in them, I'm not sure what top one is. It's in the Southern Alps, somewhere around Queenstown and Wanaka. It's clear and pristine, and then that other one in the top corner there, that's what some of our worst lakes looks like. So the difference in them. And we do riparian planting. It does work in some places, doesn't work everywhere, but we have got tools to use to make things better. And we just need to work together with the rest of our communities to deliver that. So, a brighter future. That's one of the dune lakes up at Te Paki in the far north. Totally different world up there in lots of different ways. But what we've seen through this, and what I see, in my day-to-day job, is people are more aware of this stuff, and they want to do things. So one of the things we did at the start was we'd always try and get tangata whenua involved at the start, and we'd bring them along. We'd have a knowledge sharing day, whakawhiti kōrero sort of stuff. We did it in Te Aroa. It was Aotearoa, I think. Tūhaurangi turned up, then a busload of Ngāti Tahu and Ngāti Whaua turned up. We had this karakia off thing going on the beach for about an hour. Tūhaurangi would do a karakia, the Ngāti Tahu would do a karakia that was about twice as long, and then they'd go back and forth. Pākehā scientists are standing there going, what do we do? It's like, leave them to it, they'll get over it eventually. But it's just cool to engage people, right? To pull this mud out of the lake and push it out into a tube and say, this is what's down there, this is what it looks like. You find tōtara trees from 1,000 years ago, you can find pieces of tōtara leaf. You can easily identify, I'm not an expert, but I can tell you what a tōtara leaf looks like. You can see that stuff from 1,000 years ago in that mud. It's freaking amazing as far. It's really cool to see. I think, engaging people, not just through this, but all sorts of things, is going to be a really powerful tool for us going forward. Weaving those knowledges, as I said, we tried to do a lot of stuff in bringing those, our mātauranga and our knowledge, and Paul Etz and Tūmai here, and they're on one of that second video up top there, and the bottom of the Mark Schellenberg, there's Tūmai in the forest talking about stuff. Paul Etz, so Waihora ki Taiari, Nuhuako Tukioa, the Sinclair wetlands down in Dunedin. I grew up there and I didn't even know there was a massive lake that used to be there till about 100 years ago, and the Pākehā stole it and drained it and turned it into cow farms, which all now gets pumped back into there, by the way, into our wetlands so we can go back out to sea through our wetlands. But that stuff is really cool, and there's some really cool stories and things on there. So we worked with Ōtāko, Ngāti Koata, Warirapu Moana and Oporoa, Rangi Tika Iwi, to do some of that stuff. This was a VR model that Russ, I don't know if Russ provides here, did on Lake Moawhitu in Rangi Tonga over in D'Urville Island. Just really looking at trying to build a model that says, okay, this is what it looks like now. But we also know what it used to look like because we've got the core that says this is what was here 1,000 years ago. It was covered in trees. It wasn't all bare and like this. And currently, under the water, it's all sedimentation. It's all sediment. There's a few turning around, but not much. But what it used to look like is this, where there was trees everywhere. Under the water was a completely different sort of landscape, I guess. It was productive and it was healthy. Looking what happened when the whānau arrived, so we can embed, and I think pretty sure Kylie's here. Is this stuff free to use, Kylie? Maybe she is, but anyway. We want to build other ones of these and doing this in other places. It's just a way of allowing people to engage with the environment if they don't have to physically be there, whether they're in London or, I don't know, Croatia or wherever. They can engage with this stuff, which is pretty cool. That's just some of the team that worked on it. It's a pretty big crew. There's even a few brown faces in there, not too many. We're working on that. Yeah, and I know a lot of the stuff is kind of depressing and, hell in the handbasket sort of stuff, but there's a bright future, right? We've got nowhere else to go, so let's fix it. And let's get on with doing that. So that's me, really. Kia ora.